Greetings, my friend. I'm genuinely thankful you've chosen to watch this video, and if you take a moment to subscribe, I'd appreciate it even more. It truly makes a difference. Let's dive in. My name is Charles, and when my wife's lawyer set out to paint me as an utterly irresponsible father during our custody battle, neither he nor my wife had the slightest clue what I had been quietly preparing. I studied her face as she nodded along to each accusation, clearly convinced she was about to leave that courtroom with full custody of our 8-year-old son, Ben. What she didn't suspect was that I had been laying the groundwork for this exact moment since Ben was 5 years old, and what awaited them would catch them entirely off guard. But before I get to that pivotal day, I need to step back and explain how we reached it. Lauren and I had been married for 10 years, and for most of that time, our marriage was marked by constant conflict. These weren't harmless disagreements couples sometimes work through, but ongoing, heated clashes over finances, my career, and the life she believed she was owed. Lauren never hesitated to remind me that I failed to give her the lifestyle she wanted. She often compared me to her friends' husbands, men with higher incomes, newer cars, and the means to whisk their families away on lavish vacations. I earned my living as a transmission specialist at a repair shop on the South Side. The work wasn't glamorous and didn't command a top salary, but it was steady and dependable. After taxes, my paycheck was enough to keep up with the rent on our 2-bedroom apartment in our small Ohio town, cover utilities, put food on the table, and leave a modest cushion. To me, that represented stability. To Lauren, it was settling for less. She looked at the grease on my hands and the work shirt embroidered with my name, and she felt embarrassed. Once Ben started school, her dissatisfaction grew sharper. At school functions, she'd point out other fathers and make barbed comments about how much better things could be. She began spending more nights out with friends, coming home late, and sharing stories about men they'd met at bars or restaurants. One evening, during a particularly bitter argument, I told her I was done putting up with her disrespect. That's when she revealed she had met someone else. According to her, this new man worked in commercial real estate and could provide her with the lifestyle she believed she deserved. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce. Because we rented our home and owned little of substantial value, dividing property was straightforward. Our savings amounted to about $9,000. We had no house to fight over, and my 10-year-old Honda Civic wasn't worth contesting. The real battleground was custody of Ben. And to be fair, Lauren had a case if the court looked only at my earlier years as a father. For the first 5 years of Ben's life, I was consumed by work, often putting in 60 or more hours a week. I'd leave at dawn and return after dark. Lauren handled every school drop-off and pickup, every teacher meeting, every doctor's appointment, and every bedtime. I was the weekend dad who tossed a ball in the yard and bought popcorn at the movies, while she managed everything else. But when Ben turned 5, I had a sobering realization. If Lauren ever walked away, the court would likely see me as distant and award her primary custody. Long before she met her new partner, I could sense where our marriage was heading. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I went to my boss and asked to scale back to a 40-hour work week. He wasn't thrilled. Given my experience, he relied on me. But he agreed. The choice cost me roughly $8,000 a year, and Lauren noticed almost immediately. She accused me of slacking off and caring more about my own comfort than supporting the family financially. I kept my true motivation to myself. I didn't want her realizing I was preparing for a custody fight, and I certainly didn't want her changing her habits if she caught on. With those extra hours, I became the one picking Ben up from school every afternoon at 3:15. His teacher quickly came to expect my car in the pickup line. I never missed a parent-teacher conference, a school performance, or a class party. When Ben caught strep throat, I was the one who took him to the doctor and stayed through the exam. I kept a careful record of everything: permission slips signed by me, conference schedules, doctor's visit summaries listing me as the parent present. I also took plenty of candid photos of us together at games, school events, or doing homework. Nothing staged, just everyday moments with dates preserved. Lauren noticed my deeper involvement and initially welcomed it, thinking I was finally heeding her complaints. It eased her responsibilities, so she didn't question it. She never saw that I was methodically building a history that proved my role. Over time, this became our normal routine. I was there for Ben's annual physicals. When his teacher suggested an eye exam, I took him to the optometrist and stayed during the visit. If the school nurse called about an injury, I was the one who left work to pick him up. I made sure to establish connections with the people in his world. His teacher knew me well. His Little League coach saw me at every practice and game, and the doctor's office had my work number listed first. I became the parent they called for vaccines and checkups. By the time Lauren filed for divorce years later, I had been managing Ben's daily routine for more than 2 years. She was still involved in his life, but our roles had reversed. She had taken a part-time job at a downtown boutique and spent more evenings with friends, which only increased my time with Ben. The only point her lawyer raised that truly stung was my absence from my mother-in-law's funeral. Lauren's mother had died suddenly from a heart attack several years earlier, and the service was held on a weekday. I made a choice then, one I knew could be used against me, but I believed it was the right one. While she attended the funeral and stayed close to her family, I focused on my own priorities. At the time, Ben was 7 years old and had never experienced a funeral. Lauren's mother had been battling illness for months before she passed away, yet Ben had barely interacted with her. The truth was, Lauren's connection with her mother had always been strained, and as a result, they seldom spent time together. I was fully aware that skipping the funeral would upset Lauren and draw criticism from her family, but I chose to prioritize my job over the appearance of support. Considering the repeated disrespect I had endured from both Lauren and her mother over the years, I saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Lauren clung to her resentment over that decision and made sure I knew it. She branded me selfish and unreliable, accusations that resurfaced during our divorce and the custody battle that followed. When the legal process began, she retained one of the priciest family attorneys in the region. I, in contrast, hired a younger lawyer whose fees were reasonable but who had earned strong praise from other fathers who had successfully fought for custody rights. My attorney had a blunt, no-frills approach and fully understood my strategy. Let hard evidence do the talking rather than relying on emotional pleas. The night before the hearing, I went through my records once more. School pickup logs, medical appointment records, schedules for extracurricular activities, and written statements from people who knew us well. One of the most impactful was a letter from Ben's teacher, confirming that I had been the parent responsible for picking him up from school for over 3 years, and that I had attended every single parent-teacher meeting without fail. I had also assembled a collection of photographs showing us together at school events, baseball games, camping trips, and ordinary days around town. Alongside them were Ben's report cards and progress updates, which reflected steady academic and behavioral improvement during the years I had stepped into the role of primary caregiver. Walking into court, I carried nerves, yes, but also confidence in the strength of my preparation. Lauren sat at the petitioner's table next to her attorney, radiating self-assurance. Her legal team's entire case rested on the traditional assumption that fathers seldom receive equal custody, especially when the mother has been the primary caregiver for most of the child's life. Their narrative painted me as a work-obsessed and unreliable father who put his job ahead of his family. When the session began, Lauren's lawyer delivered his opening remarks. He cast her as a tireless mother who had single-handedly raised Ben while I buried myself in my work. He even took aim at my profession, implying that my career as a mechanic somehow made me less capable as a parent. To bolster this image, he mentioned my absence from her mother's funeral, using it as proof of poor priorities and a lack of family commitment. Listening to him shrink my work, my choices, and my role as a father into a few condescending sentences sent heat rushing to my face. Beside him, Lauren nodded approvingly, clearly believing this portrayal would guarantee her full custody. Then my lawyer rose to speak. She avoided personal attacks and stayed clear of emotional theatrics. Instead, she asked the court's permission to submit concrete evidence of my role in Ben's upbringing over the past 3 years. She began with the school records confirming my responsibility for daily pickups. Next came the teacher's letter. I saw Lauren's confidence falter when the medical records showed my consistent attendance at Ben's appointments for more than 2 years. Character references further reinforced my commitment, and the photographs left little doubt about the depth and constancy of my involvement in Ben's life. By then, the self-assured expression Lauren had worn earlier had all but disappeared. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering urgently, clearly caught off guard by the thoroughness of my case. In a last-ditch effort, her attorney argued that my hands-on parenting had only begun when the marriage was failing. But my lawyer was ready for that. She presented proof that my shift into being Ben's primary caretaker started well over 2 years before the divorce filing, and that I had even accepted a substantial pay cut to make it possible. This, she emphasized, was evidence of prioritizing my son over career advancement. When the judge asked Lauren's attorney if he had any documents to refute my evidence, he had nothing to offer. Lauren had counted on her role as Ben's mother being enough to win by default. She never anticipated needing to present her own proof. She had no teacher statements, no medical records, and no photographic evidence showing regular involvement in Ben's daily life over the past 3 years. The judge called a 30-minute recess to review the submissions. Lauren remained at her table with her lawyer, visibly shaken and on the verge of tears. She had walked into court convinced she would secure primary custody, only to watch her argument disintegrate. When court resumed, the judge delivered the verdict: joint custody, with Ben alternating weeks between our households. She acknowledged that Lauren had been Ben's primary caregiver in his early childhood, but stated that the evidence overwhelmingly showed I had filled that role for the past 3.5 years. Preserving a close relationship with both parents, she concluded, was in Ben's best interest. Lauren's composure crumbled entirely. The certainty she'd carried into the courtroom was gone, replaced by disbelief. Her entire case had been built on assumptions, and without proof, it collapsed. I didn't feel triumph, only relief. I had protected my relationship with my son not by tearing Lauren down, but by consistently showing up and documenting my role. The years of steady involvement had been worth far more than the paperwork, though in the end, both had been essential. Finalizing the arrangements took several more weeks. Ben would alternate weeks between our homes, with handoffs on Sunday evenings. We would switch off holidays, and both of us were entitled to attend his school events and medical appointments. Because she was living with Derek and their combined income was higher, Lauren was ordered to pay child support for my weeks, though the amount was small due to the equal custody split. The adjustment proved harder for Lauren than for Ben. He was already used to spending time with both of us, and the new schedule meant more focused time with each parent. For me, life after the divorce felt lighter and far more peaceful. Once Lauren's spending was no longer draining our finances, my paycheck seemed to stretch further than it had in years. She often voiced frustration over our money troubles, but the truth was that her own habits had been the main obstacle to saving anything meaningful. She would purchase clothing she wore only a single time, stock up on expensive skincare products that ended up half-used, and order takeout even when our fridge was already filled with food. When Ben stayed with his mother, living on my own allowed me, for the first time in a long while, to build up real savings. I started putting money aside for emergencies, contributing to a fund for Ben's future, and setting aside enough for the occasional trip for just the two of us during his school breaks. My small apartment became a space of calm instead of constant strain, and I could devote my full attention to being the best father I could during my time with him. Those uninterrupted stretches together strengthened our bond, free from the cloud of Lauren's dissatisfaction hanging over daily life. It took her a few months to adjust, but eventually she adapted to our new arrangement. The man she chose after our split didn't provide the lifestyle she had imagined for long. Ben occasionally mentioned hearing them argue, but I stayed out of it. It was no longer my concern. She never apologized for the accusations her attorney hurled at me in court, though she did, in time, acknowledge that I had shown myself to be a capable and committed parent. Looking back at that day in court, I'm glad I stayed focused. I could have gone on the attack, pointing out her reckless spending, her unpredictable moods, or the fact she began dating before we were even officially separated. But instead, I kept my attention on proving my dedication to my son, supported by thorough and consistent records. In the end, the evidence told the story more powerfully than any personal jab ever could. The real victory wasn't in refuting her claims. It was in protecting my relationship with Ben. Now that he's 11, our connection is rock solid. He knows I'll be there for his school functions, to help with homework, and to show up whenever he's unwell, anxious, or excited about something new. For fathers facing the same kind of battle, my advice is simple. Don't wait until you're in front of a judge to become the parent you want to be seen as. Document everything, but more importantly, be present in your child's daily life. Show up without fail, keep in regular contact with teachers, doctors, and coaches, and put your child's needs above your own convenience. I still remember the sting of hearing myself described in court as a low-level mechanic with a pattern of disappearing, especially with strangers in the room. It was deeply humiliating. But the truth contained in my records dismantled those words, and that truth was what swayed the judge. Now, 2 years into our shared custody arrangement, Ben is thriving. His grades are strong, his circle of friends is solid, and he has both parents engaged in his growth and happiness. While Lauren and I will never be close, we have learned how to co-parent without hostility. We coordinate on his needs, attend his school events together, and have each moved forward with our own separate lives. I'm still working at the auto repair shop, and I take pride in my work. Lauren may have looked down on my profession, but it's steady, honest labor that allows me to provide for my son and remain actively involved in his life. The judge never cared about my job title. What mattered was my commitment as a father. That stack of documents I carried into the courtroom represented 3 years of intentional parenting, 3 years of putting Ben first, of building a bond that could withstand the strain of divorce and custody battles. It was the wisest investment I've ever made, and every moment was worth it for him. And that's where our story comes to a close. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening, and if this story resonated with you, I invite you to explore the other videos on this channel. Until next time, my friend.